Sure. Well, I mean, I kind of have two jobs. So my career has been as a criminal defense attorney with an expertise in use of force law. So the only cases I work on are self-defense cases, essentially cases of defending yourself, defending your family, defending your property, and someone ends up getting criminally charged. And I've done that for 34 years. We write books on it. We do webinars on it, all that good stuff. You can find that part of my work at lawofselfdefense.com.
I will put that link in there.
Then just about a year ago, when Trump got reelected, he got sworn in, these federal courts started going insane with their injunctions and their rulings. And I could see they were nonsense. But unless you were a legal professional who really knew this stuff, this constitutional law issues, a lot of people were getting fooled into thinking these judges are just kind of doing their job and acting in a righteous way. And they're not. They're complete partisan hacks. So I started doing shows kind of unwinding those decisions and translating them into plain English, and they proved to be rather popular. So I found myself at 60 with a second job, a second full-time job doing political and legal commentary over at the Branca show. And sometimes those two worlds overlap, like in this case where we have this ICE shooting up in Minnesota, obviously high-profile public interest, and also involving my use of force law expertise.
I am a firm believer that I don't believe, and maybe I'm wrong here. I do a morning show. I do a morning show every morning before I go to work. I take phone calls, the old Rush style. And I catch myself so many times defending the current attorney general, but I'm not really defending her. I'm defending the position. I don't believe any attorney general right now could be successful. Perry Mason, Jessica Lansbury, I don't believe anything. Matlock. I don't believe any attorney general would be able to get convictions because of the obstacles that the previous administrations put in place with liberal judges. What's your take on that? Am I wrong for thinking that or saying it out loud?
Well, I mean, it's worse than that when it comes to getting convictions, because you also have to convince a jury. And we've become such a hyper-polarized people, and especially within the urban centers, or hyper-polarized progressive fascists, it's become a very tribal kind of society. And people of a tribe will never convict their own tribe. They just won't do it. When we were all kind of self-identifying as Americans with slight differences in political opinions, you could overcome that. You would just talk the jury through being impartial and unbiased and not coming in with preconceived conceptions about the case. But now they have preconceived conceptions about everything, about the entire infrastructure of our society. If you voted for Trump, you're literally the H character. I won't say it because YouTube doesn't like it. If you're the anti-tribe, you're an existential threat to their very way of life and what they view in the world as good. They're never going to vote to acquit you. Just like Derek Chauvin never had any hope of getting acquitted. And the truth is, you can only have a functioning jury system in a reasonably cohesive society. If the society is balkanized and tribalized, the jury system just doesn't work. We actually see this now, by the way, in many Western countries that have a sizable minority population. Here in America, we might just say African Americans. African Americans vote many times more often to convict white defendants than they do black defendants. And that's just part of that. I'm not trying to, it's just human nature. That's just how people feel about their in-group. They just won't do it. And it would be the same as if you had an Indian defendant and an Indian jury and everybody else in the system was white. They just won't do it. They won't vote to acquit. They won't vote against their tribal interest. And now the tribes are political as well. So no, I don't think you can. I think the only saving grace is that the pool of geography from which the federal courts draw juries tends to be bigger than on the state level system. So in a state level system, like in Minneapolis, if it's a state prosecution, all your jurors are coming from basically Minneapolis County, they're all progressive. If it's a federal prosecution, it's 3 counties. And some of the outlying counties are not as liberal. So you may have a hope of getting some, non-progressive fascist jurors. You still, of course, have to get past the judges. The judges are just as tribalized politically as the jurors I just spoke about. And these are real problems because then we don't have a system of impartial justice anymore. And we don't.
Yeah, somebody made a comment, firing Bondi will not automatically make judges better. That's a fact. I don't know
The trouble
how
with
we get
Bondi,
past it.
Bondi has real challenges, and I don't want to minimize those. The
Yeah.
Department of Justice has been infected with progressive fascists for decades, and so you can't just fire people. You don't even know who they are. You can't read their minds. You have to wait for them to expose themselves. And they're part of the system of the Department of Justice. A lot of them have left, especially in the Civil Rights Division, which is nice, except now there's no lawyers to do that work. And part of the strategy of the left since Trump has been elected is to overwhelm the Department of Justice with so many cases and so many appeals they have to make with highly constrained resources now that so many lawyers have left. That's not even considering the lawyers who haven't left, who are undermining the administration's efforts actively. That's a real problem for Bondi. People don't understand. You need lawyers to do the work, lawyers who know what they're doing. And it can take months to onboard a new lawyer to the Department of Justice to the point where they're effective. So certainly when nothing much was happening in January of last year, February, March, April, I was cautioning people, you have to be patient. It takes time to get new guys on board. Now we've had that time. And my gripe I have with Bondi now isn't that she's not winning, because winning is going to be difficult for the reasons we talked about. It's that I don't see her fighting. I don't see the effort. I don't even see kind of the micro goals, right? All right, we can't get a conviction yet, maybe, but we can indict this many people. We can charge that many people. These are the arguments we're making in court. You don't necessarily, like George Washington, right, fought the Revolutionary War. That first year was hard. I mean, he did nothing but lose, basically. Strategically win, but tactically lose. He was chased off battlefield after battlefield after battlefield. You had to be patient with him. You had to give him the opportunity to win. But he was making micro wins along the way, right? Like his retreats were organized. They were not chaotic. He still had an army when he was done, which, of course, is what enabled him to do Princeton and Trenton and, that great crossing of the river, the Delaware, on Christmas night. We need messaging to the troops from Bondi, the troops being the American people who elected Trump. Listen, we're not seeing the big wins yet, but we are getting the micro wins. We are building the momentum. And I don't see that communication from them. Maybe they're doing it and I'm not seeing it, but if they're doing it and I'm not seeing it, either they're not doing it or nobody's seeing it.
Yeah. I used to work in DC as a lobbyist. I'm a firm believer there's no coincidences in politics. And I had a guy on the other night, Chris Payota. He's a former number 3, number 4 at the FBI. And he kind of said that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino they glorified so much before they went in that they didn't really know what they were up against. And it's almost like they built this giant monster and then they couldn't slay it and they looked like failures to the American people. And I don't know if that's the same thing that I don't know.
The trouble is the FBI has been as co-opted as the Department of Justice. So I have very good friends of mine who were career in the FBI. They went in, I want to say they went in the 1990s, right? And they're retired now. They've retired out. But they've described to me, when they went in the 1990s, the FBI was hiring a lot of what I would call door kickers. Like my friends were all combat veterans from the first Gulf War. Sure. They were getting hired by the FBI. But over the years, the FBI began to hire more accountants and more lawyers, and then the whole DEI thing. So now you had to be a gay female accountant or a gay female lawyer. And those people, for them to be in the presence of a door kicker is a living humiliation. They know they can't do what those guys can do. And it humiliates them. And so once they get in positions of power, they marginalize those guys. My friends' careers in the FBI were sharply limited because they were not gay, female, lesbian accountants. They were combat veterans. Yeah. And they just stayed in the system and they got to the retirement point and took their pensions and, now they get paid to stay home, as they say. But that was a visible, visceral transformation in the FBI. That's the FBI. That corrupted FBI is the FBI that Kash Patel was put in charge of. And if he thought that there's a few bad guys in the top, and there's a few bad guys who are, agents provocateur for left-wing causes within the agency, and we'll just get rid of them. But the core is still healthy. The core is not healthy. It's not. It's like a surgeon goes into a patient looking for a little tumor and finds nothing but cancer all throughout the body. It's like, well, all right, this is not going to be a 1-hour surgery. This could be a generation. The FBI didn't become like this overnight. It's not going to unbecome like this overnight.
Somebody asked a question. Should they fire Bondi? The corruption is crazy. We're sick of no accountability. Question. And somebody said that my always the same map mug showed up today. Thank you. So there you go.
Oh yeah. Mine is up in the dishwasher. I don't have it here, but should they fire Bondi? I mean, obviously Trump has expressed his frustrations with Bondi in Truth Social. I mean, if you just worked for a company, right, and you had a vice president who was general counsel for the company, and the CEO was going on the company-wide website and saying, why the F is nothing happening with our general counsel? If I were that general counsel, I'd be looking for another job. So I think he can't be too far from firing her. The problem is, of course, he can hardly get anyone approved in the Senate.
I don't know who you could get confirmed.
Right. So only 15% of his attorneys general have been approved in the Senate. If he gets rid of Bondi, who says he gets another attorney general in? And then all these federal judges are going to do what they do with the prosecutors. They're going to say, well, they haven't been confirmed by the Senate. They only had 120 days to get confirmed. Now they're illegitimate. And everything they did was illegitimate. And so all these indictments, everything has to be dismissed. So I think that's a risk. What's saving Pam Bondi's ass may just be the Democrat senators and the feckless Republicans in the Senate who are blocking Trump's nominations.
It's like an ex-wife. It's cheaper to keep her, or a wannabe ex-wife. It might be cheaper to keep her. Here's a question for you.
It's usually worth it not to.
Exactly.
In my
this
experience.
Is the elephant in the room. With everything that's happening in Minnesota, everybody is armchair quarterbacking down to the actual, I would even call it the frame per second on what happened. What is I watched your 5 or 8 minute video where you broke it down, even talking about the SIG P320 possibly going off and triggering that. I'm under the assumption, as a concealed carry holder and investor in a gun company, I would never take a gun to a protest. Number one, if an officer approaches me, I've got friends in law enforcement, I always tell them I am armed. What is your take on that? That's the elephant in the room right now. And it seems like, I think the only thing Democrats would prefer was that Renee Good was a woman of color with 7 kids or an illegal migrant, that this guy that was shot, Peretti, that he was a gay, black, maybe transgender, whatever. If he met all those, but sadly they got 2 white people. And I believe they were looking for another Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd. I believe that's what the Democrat Party would love right now. And I believe they will sacrifice Minnesota for their hatred for Trump.
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't make an omelet without breaking eggs, right? For them, these dead people are not glitches. These are features of the system. These are now martyrs for their cause. They knew people were going to be killed when they initiated this stochastic terrorism, right? All these cries of, oh, you're monsters, you're dictators, you're putting American citizens in concentration camps and all this kind of nonsense. You put that hate out into your community as a narrative. You don't know exactly who's going to do exactly what, but you know some of those people are going to absorb that hate and express it in violence to the other side. That's absolutely certain. Just like throwing a rock off a building. You may not know exactly where it's going to hit the ground, but you know it's going to hit the ground. There's no question about that. So, of course, they know they're doing this. In terms of carrying a gun at a protest, listen, I don't tell people what to do, right? I just try to help people make informed decisions. So, from my perspective, and I say this as a guy who carries a gun for protection every day. I have for my entire adult life. If I'm at a protest, I've got a gun because I always have a gun. But I'm probably not at a protest, and I'm definitely not on a protest if I expect there to be violence. And I'm definitely not at a protest where I expect there to be violence where I will be attacking police officers. fundamentally, all the legal technicalities aside, what happened to Alex Preddy is like what you would expect to happen if a dude left a bar, dead drunk, in the middle of an ice storm and drove his Trans Am down the highway at 150 miles an hour, and then he lost control and crashed and got killed. I mean, the sentence for reckless drunk driving is not capital punishment. We don't execute you for that, but no one should be surprised that you died doing that. Right? The punishment for what Alex Preddy did is not capital punishment, but no one should be surprised that if you're an aggressive disruptor, of a felony criminal engaged in assault on federal law enforcement officers, when they know they're getting death threats every day, when they know people are getting injured, rammed with cars, guys are showing up with guns, they know all this, and you have a gun on your person and you get in that kind of violent confrontation. Would it have been better if they could have, I don't know, tasered him or had a canine or had a different outcome in this case? Yeah, sure, that would be better. But no one should be surprised that this guy ended up dead. That's how you end up dead. You get into fights while armed with police officers.
Question here for you. With the signal chats coming out in Minnesota that the state is going against the federal government, apparently there's 750 members in this signal chat, including Tim Walz's multiple advisors. How does that change the formula? I believe Tim Walz is finished. I personally believe Amy Klobuchar will probably inherit the Game of Thrones there in Minnesota. And I'm a big fan of Mike Lindell. He sponsors my channel. I just don't see Mike Lindell. It's going to be difficult for him to win. Minnesota, the last time they went red for a presidential election was under Nixon. They elected Jesse Ventura, which I wouldn't call a conservative or a Republican. But I think Mike is going to be up against everything. But the signal chats, how does this complicate some of the violence, the inciting of violence? And how does that incite, or how does that work out?
Well, I mean, it's an even more robust foundation for Trump's invoking, I should say, the Insurrection Act than he already had. Clearly now he's dealing not just with, what liberal judges would say, individuals expressing their First Amendment rights in protest. This is clearly organized not just at the individual level, like an Antifa level, but at the state level. You have the officials of a state in their official state capacity in a process of sedition and insurrection against the federal government. This is exactly the kind of situation in which the Insurrection Act has been used throughout history. And, we think about the Insurrection Act, and most people probably know, George Washington was the first president to invoke the Insurrection Act in the Whiskey Rebellion. He literally got on his high horse and led men into combat to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. And his authority to do that was the Insurrection Act. So we tend to think of it as this being this old-timey provision, like a relic from the past. But it's not. The Insurrection Act has been used dozens of times in America's history by dozens of presidents. In fact, the only thing odd about the Insurrection Act in 2026 is we're actually in the longest period of American history right now in which it has not been used. If anything, we're overdue for a use of the Insurrection Act. Now, this just adds more fuel to the fire for invoking the Insurrection Act. A state insurrection against the federal government. Civil war, anyone? I mean, Minneapolis may as well have fired on Fort Sumter. I would, however, say that Trump already had more than enough grounds. The Insurrection Act is very broad. The conditions that have to be met are very generalized and very much at the discretion of the president. I mean, can anyone say, for example, one requirement that allows for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act is that it's impracticable for him to enforce federal law. Are these disruptors in Minneapolis not making it impractical to enforce immigration law in Minneapolis? Of course they are. That's their whole purpose. That's what they're accomplishing. That's enough for the Insurrection Act. I'm not sure how much more Trump needs. I mean, do we have to have Minneapolis police officers actually firing on Customs and Border Patrol personnel before he's ready to move forward with the Insurrection Act?
I think that's what happens next. I literally think that's what happens next. I've never seen protesters, rioters, whatever you want to call these people, so aggressive. They have no boundaries. The guy he got his finger bit off. I mean, Like, what in the hell? And then I saw him actually rolling around on the floor today or on the ground today. I read something earlier that invoking the Insurrection Act could sway the midterms or Trump or JD Vance getting elected in 28. But I don't think right now, does Trump have any other option? Because I've asked some of my liberal wacko friends that are wearing hockey helmets and drool trays. I'm like, what do you want? What could Trump do to win you over? They don't have an answer.
No, nothing.
I don't think they have an answer.
You're not swinging those people over. They'll die hating Trump. There's risks with invoking the Insurrection Act, right? Just political capital risk. How would the legacy media portray that as Trump being a dictator, right? As Trump being a king, no King's Day, right. But who watches the legacy media today? You know what I mean? Who trusts them? I mean, their trust rating is in the toilet. It's even below Congress, which is pretty bad. I think the real media is on X today. Yeah. And X would perceive that news very differently. But even if you're thinking, they're going to characterize me as a dictator if I do that, and that's a cost of invoking the Insurrection Act, a political cost. There's also a political cost in your side feeling like you're not delivering on what you promised them, that you're an ineffectual leader. They may not vote for the Democrat candidate for president, but they will not turn out for you. If they think you're ineffective, people will not follow an ineffective leader. Human beings just don't work that way. And for all the great things that Trump is accomplishing overseas, and it's a lot, and it's well worth accomplishing, it's key to America's national security. You do not win American elections on foreign policy. You just don't. You win American elections based on how the voters feel about themselves today, their expectation for their prospects in the future. Are things getting at least better if they're not already good? And if you can't give them that, if you can't show them that, they just won't turn out. And then we get a Democrat. And of course, if we get a Democrat, it's all over. I mean, you thought it was bad when Biden let in 20 million illegals, and it's not 20 million. He let in a multiple of 20 million. But next time it'll be 200 million. And next time the Democrats won't make the same mistake and leave these people vulnerable to deportation. They will formalize their status. They will make them instant American citizens. And that's it. America will have become a third world nation. And for those of you who've worked hard all your lives and have assets, you have a 401k, you have a home, you think if Somalians are the electorate, they're going to let you keep that stuff?
Oh, God.
No, it's all gone. It'll just be taken from you. It'll be taxed from you. It'll be seized from you. It'll be redistributed from you. It's everything. Everything is gone if that happens.
I mean, we know that the government's going to be shut down in 5 days. The Democrats have already said the only way they vote to keep the government open for this continuing resolution is defund ICE, defund Department of Homeland Security. The government's going to get shut down. I kind of think it would be let them shut the government down and then you invoke the Insurrection Act. But I don't know if Minneapolis can survive 5 more days. If this was the summer, it would look like Sherman rolling through Atlanta.
Yeah. Good point. This is what they're doing when it's 20 degrees out, right? What happens when they can go out in shorts and a t-shirt?
Yeah. I mean, somebody said here, why can't Waltz be arrested? I don't know what it takes to arrest a governor or a mayor of Minneapolis. I don't know what would have to happen to arrest someone at that level. I live in Arkansas. I've got Governor Sarah Sanders. I'm very lucky, but I don't know what it will take. But I agree with you. You said something earlier. The American people want scalps. I'm a big hunter, firearm guy. I go to Bass Pro. If I walked into Bass Pro and there were no trophies on the walls, it's a warehouse. With trophies on the walls, I feel like, man, this is what I need. This is what I need to get some trophies. I think Trump's got to get a couple of trophies to maintain any level of momentum. But do you think you
have to at least be in the hunt? You have to be in the hunt, right? Every time you go hunting, you don't get your game, right? Every time you go fishing, you don't catch a fish. But you have to be making the effort. And you have to be perceived as making the effort, not just doing the work, but perceived as doing the work. Imagine if people had to vote for you to go hunting. You'd want to demonstrate pretty clearly you're hunting as hard as you can, right? So those people vote for you. There are things that the Department of Justice is doing. They're going after this LaMonica McIver, congresswoman out in Jersey, who went into that, assaulted officers going in. She's looking at least 8 years felony prison time. She may well get acquitted, right? The jury just might be liberals and engage in jury nullification and just let her go. So you can't promise the head, but you can promise the effort to get the head, and then they should be communicating about that a lot more effectively. In fact, if the parties were reversed, what the Democrats would be doing is talking in the media every week about how, these judges and jurors, they better do the right thing. They better not do jury nullification. This country deserves law and order. They would be communicating that kind of message every time. So if things do go sideways, it's still at least a political win for you. Yeah, listen, she got acquitted. We fought the good fight, and they are corrupt. And this is evidence of their corruption. Instead, when there's an acquittal, like you don't even hear about it. Like this guy who put a $10,000 bounty out on, I think it was Pam Bondi's head. He just got acquitted by a jury. We should be talking about that.
Did you see what the Arizona Attorney General said? Did you see what?
I saw the reporting on it. I haven't actually had a chance to listen to her own words. So
I want to show you this. This was one of the things that I so wanted to get your opinion on, was this right here. I've kind of sped ahead, and I'm not going to try to influence the jury. You're the jury here.
Including video and images of the events in question.
We are encouraging people to send us their videos, and they have every right under the First Amendment to record those videos.
If there are confrontations between residents and ICE agents, like we've seen in other cities, Mays is concerned they could turn deadly because of Arizona's so-called stand your ground law.
That makes Arizona very, very different from almost every other state where this buildup is happening, Bram, is that we're a stand your ground state.
The law allows citizens to defend themselves if they reasonably believe their life is in danger.
But to be clear, you're not telling folks you have license if you are threatened to shoot a peace officer.
No, but again, if you're being attacked by someone who is not identified as a peace officer, how do you know?
That's one reason.
Andrew, I'm turning it over to the jury.
That's the stochastic terrorism, right? Well, you don't know. It's like the seditious six. You don't have to follow unlawful orders. We're only telling you what the law is. You don't have to follow unlawful orders. She's saying, well, if you don't know if it's a cop, then you can defend yourself. Then it's just a criminal attack. If it's not a cop, people can't just walk up and shove you off the street onto the sidewalk. If that's not a cop, you're allowed to defend yourself. That's the stochastic terrorism. They don't know exactly who is going to shoot which cop, but they know. They're putting the language out there. They're putting the emotional state out there for this to happen.
Now,
the weird thing is for Arizona, she talks about, liberals hate this stand your ground. It's a boogeyman for them. All stand your ground means, the only thing it means, is if you would otherwise have had a legal duty to retreat before you can defend yourself, you no longer have that legal duty to retreat before you can defend yourself. Your defense still has to be lawful self-defense. So all it says is if you are the innocent victim of unlawful, imminent violence capable of killing you, and you're not imagining that's all reasonably perceived, we're not going to put you in prison for the rest of your life for defending yourself under that circumstance because someone thinks you could hypothetically have run away instead. We're going to let you stand your ground and act in what would otherwise be perfectly lawful self-defense. The stand your ground states say you could do everything right. It could be a perfect case of self-defense. But if we think you could have run away instead, we're going to put you in a cage for the rest of your life for having to defend yourself. Now, there's only 11 states in the country that are not stand your ground states, that are duty to retreat states. There's only 11 of them. Of course, as you might expect, they're all liberal states. Like Minnesota is a duty to retreat state. Arizona passed stand your ground, but now it has a liberal governor. So there's like a conflict in philosophy there. That's why she's talking about it. She hates it on an emotional, visceral level. She wants you to have to meet that additional requirement for lawful self-defense. Arizona doesn't require it. So when that happens, the liberals always try to characterize stand your ground as some kind of monstrous twisting of the law that lets you kill people on a whim and get away with it. That's not at all what it means. But that's how she thinks about it, and that's how she wants to portray it. So stand your ground. It's just another opportunity for her to say, well, stand your ground. I've been telling you all this time. We shouldn't have it. It's a bad thing. This is another way in which it's bad.
I mean,
it's
I'm now seeing CNN say that, well, it was the Second Amendment. He had a right to carry a gun. I'm seeing an attorney general in Arizona saying, stand your ground. This is so flipped. This is the flip that the Democrats said that the Republicans were actually the Democrats were actually Republicans during the Civil War. I'm seeing another flip here, and it's so weird.
What they like to do is of course, any of these events have a lot of facts, right? They're multifactorial. And so what they like to do is they like to take one of those facts, pretend that's the relevant one, and then say, well, they shot him only for exercising his Second Amendment rights. They may as well say they shot him for wearing shoes. They shot him for wearing pants. Was he wearing shoes and was he wearing pants? Yeah, of course. Was he exercising his Second Amendment rights? Yes, he was. That's not why they shot him. They shot him because he was doing all that other stuff, exercising his Second Amendment rights, wearing pants, wearing shoes, and attacking police officers. They leave that part out.
What is your perspective? Because a lot of people might not have watched your breakdown. What is your perspective on what we saw or what we were? I think we saw one thing, but we were narrated something else. I think that's where I'm at.
So, there's definitely a lot of ambiguity in those videos. The legal question is, did the officer who fired the shot have a reasonable perception? It doesn't have to be correct. You're not required to be correct in self-defense. We're not required to make perfect decisions in self-defense. We're required to make reasonable decisions in self-defense. Did the officer who fired the shot or officers who fired the shots, did they have a reasonable perception of an imminent unlawful threat of deadly force harm from Alex Preddy, even if mistaken? More accurately, the legal question is, could a prosecutor, because the burden is on a prosecutor to disprove that claim beyond any reasonable doubt. So does the evidence support the prospect that a prosecutor could disprove beyond any reasonable doubt that these officers had at least a reasonable perception that they were facing an imminent unlawful threat of deadly force harm? And I just don't see that happening on these facts. The guy was confrontational. He was engaged in felony assault on these officers. He was armed with a gun. He was non-compliant with arrest. He was fighting them. And then it's the car traveling down the ice-covered street while you're drunk at 150 miles an hour. He ends up getting killed. Was it literally necessary to kill him? Would he have turned and murdered all those cops with his gun if he had the opportunity? We'll never know. But that's not what the law requires. The law requires a reasonable perception that he was about to do that. And you hear the gunshot behind you or around you. They don't know where this gunshot's coming from. They heard a cry of gun. They know this guy's fighting them. He already felony assaulted another one of their officers. Everything is primed for these officers. And once one cop shoots, of course they all shoot, because they're all relying on the judgment of that fellow officer who made the initial decision that they reasonably perceived. And they're allowed to do that. You're allowed to presume your fellow officers are making reasonable decisions, however that might be judged in the aftermath. In the moment of crisis, you're allowed to rely on the judgment of your fellow officers. So once one cop shoots, they all shoot, and then you end up with that popcorn of, 7 or 8 shots going off. But the catalyst for all this is what? The catalyst is Alex Preddy going to a protest to aggressively and unlawfully impede federal law enforcement, commit felony assault on federal law enforcement while armed, not comply with arrest, and he ends up getting himself shot and killed. No one should be surprised by this, least of all Alex Preddy.
I don't love it, but my wife's a nurse practitioner. My daughter's a registered nurse. I love how the news media latched onto ICE agent kills nurse. That's the narrative.
Right.
But nobody gave an absolute molecule of shit that Laken Riley was a nursing student. Nobody gave a damn about that. But now that's the narrative. And it seems like that the current administration is fighting against the Democrat Party, corrupt some of these judges that are partisan, and also the news media. And it seems like a dangerous combination when you have that triad of liars all working against you. I don't know how, if this does go to court, whichever, if they try all the officers, if they get a fair trial in Minnesota. I don't know how you could, or I mean, everybody on TV on certain channels has already judge, jury, executioner. I'm in Arkansas. We had Roy Bean down just 30 miles south of me. But what do you think happens to this? Does this go to court? Does this get dismissed? Does it force ICE to leave? I mean,
well, it's not going to court now. So, if the Department of Justice doesn't want to prosecute these officers. So if they're going to be prosecuted, it'll be by the state of Minnesota. If the state of Minnesota indicts these officers, the DOJ will just go to federal court and have the charges dismissed, because under the Supremacy Clause, a state cannot prosecute a federal officer for conduct he exercises in the course of his federal duties. The Supremacy Clause doesn't allow that. So that's what would happen. If they got charged in Minnesota, it would just move to federal court. They'd get it dismissed. The risk for the officers is, what if the next administration is a Democrat administration? What if Minnesota does not charge these officers today, but there is no statute of limitations on murder? So in the future, they could charge these cops with murder. And if it's a Democrat administration, the Democrat administration may just say, well, we're not interested in defending these guys in federal court. We're going to let the state prosecution go forward. So in that sense, these officers are in legal peril of being prosecuted in Minnesota. And of course, then they would be railroaded like Derek Chauvin was railroaded. I say all that, and that's all technically true. But of course, we have to keep in mind that if the Democrats get back in charge, it's all over anyway. I mean, these officers will be the least of our worries. We won't have food.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's so many black pill supposed right-wing conservatives on various platforms that all they do is tear down the current administration every day because it gets clicks. And I'm just like, it was a binary choice, Kamala Harris or Trump. And it's another binary choice. It's maintain your sovereignty, or God forbid, you might get Gavin Newsom. Or whatever other clown.
I was just a guest on a program a few days ago, and they were very nice guys, and I was happy to come on. I had a good time being a guest on the show. But a lot of their audience was very black-pilled, and they were like, oh, if we don't get this or that, we're not going to show up for the Republicans in the midterms. I'm like, I mean, you can do that. Again, I don't tell people what to do. I just try to help people make informed decisions. Just know that if you don't show up and a Democrat wins, America's over. We will be, there's 7 billion third worlders just waiting to flood into our nation. And the Democrats, we already know, they fly them in, they bust them in, they train them in. I mean, America is over. Now, I'm not a black pillar. I try to be rational about the risks we're facing. America is facing an existential risk, a risk to our national survival of a kind, and our cultural survival we've never faced before. This is a greater risk than the Civil War. Right? If the North had lost the Civil War, we just would have ended up with 2 Americas, right? Because the South wasn't trying to conquer the North. The South just basically wanted to be left alone. We would have had 2 Americas. If we lost the Revolutionary War, we wouldn't have had a United States of America, but we still would have been first world for the time, first world British subjects, right? Culturally, we'd still be alive. If we lose this world, our first world culture gets obliterated by hundreds of millions of third worlders the Democrats will bring in to replace us. And so that's the real risk. Now, I'm not a black pillar in the sense that I see the path to that not happening. We don't have to go that way. We have options. We have Trump. We have Vance. We have Marco Rubio. We have good people. We have good Americans. We still have the opportunity to win this war. But you do have to win it.
I believe a lot of people have gotten complacent with Trump in office. And he's great, but he can't do everything. And there are some real rhino Republicans that have hidden the shadows. They've been exposed. They exposed themselves. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I thought that she was this Make America Great Again, America First. Now she's probably going to be a co-host on The View. Matt Gaetz, he didn't get a chance to be attorney general. He would have never got confirmed with the baggage. And everybody still thinks he would have been the greatest attorney general ever. But he probably wouldn't have ever gotten confirmed. And now there's this little cell of infighting that would rather burn it all down and basically, like you said, just don't vote and let the Democrats take back over. And then we'll get this great reset of the Republican
Then
Party.
everybody will wake up and vote Republican next time. But there'll never be another Republican next time. America will be a supermajority Democrat state like California is, like Colorado, where I live, is. Once they corrupt, the only thing, you only have a republic when the people in official government positions are answerable to the actual body politic of the people, right? When our voting matters, when we can change who's in charge. If you can't change who's in charge by voting, you're living in a tyranny, whatever you call it. The people in charge are not responsible to you, are not accountable to you. And we barely have a semblance of that now because our current election systems are so corrupt. But if the U.S. as a nation were to go no ID, universal mail-in balloting, I mean, I moved to Colorado about 10 years ago. I saw Colorado go from a purple state with a divided legislature and occasionally Republican governor to a state that is more hard blue today than California. And that happened in about 6 years.
That's right.
That's all it took. And that's what would happen in America as a nation. It would all be, and then of course they fly in the third worlders, a couple 100 million of them, make them all instant citizens, give them all a right to vote. You see how the Somalians function in Minneapolis, right? Very tribal. They stick to each other. They're all engaged in the same corruption. Everything's family oriented. It's almost impossible to investigate these organizations because there's no one to talk to. No one's going to rat out their wife or their mother or their cousin in these communities. They'd rather go to jail first. And of course, it'll be a jail full of Somalians. So actually nicer than Somalia. And so they'll still be a step up from where they were before.
Here's a question for you. Do you think Trump has a bigger plan he hasn't revealed? Do you think some of these judges have to be impeached? Does Congress have to remove the judges? Is that how that goes? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
So I don't think that'll ever happen. I don't know.
I mean, so we've removed from the bench I think it's about 15 federal judges in our lifetime, mostly for things like taking bribes. But they have to, the normal way we do that, the way we've always done it, is impeachment, the constitutional impeachment process, which means the House votes by a majority to impeach, and then the Senate has to vote by 2/3 to convict. 67 votes in the 100-person Senate. We don't have 67 votes.
We'll never get that.
So we can't impeach these judges. We could. I'm sorry. We can't remove these judges through impeachment. We could impeach them in the House. And that would send it to the Senate. And then the Senate could have hearings, like a trial, which is what they do. They could bring these judges in under oath. They could expose their fecklessness to the public and televised, effectively trials in the Senate. I think that would be very helpful and productive to do. And that might act as a check on some of the more grosser overreaches of these judges. If they know they're going to be subject, even if they know they can't actually be removed, they're going to be subject to that kind of unpleasantness. That might temper some of their overreach. The other way, in theory, you can get rid of judges. And I caution, we've never actually done this. But in the Constitution, Article 3, federal judges aren't actually given lifetime appointments. Article 3 doesn't say you serve for life. It says you serve during good behavior. And what I would argue is good behavior. What defines good behavior? I mean, opinions can vary, right? But the Article 3 judiciary has itself defined kind of a code of ethics, a code of conduct for federal judges. Article 2 did not impose that on them. Article 1, Congress did not impose it. This is their own set of rules for conduct. And they're clearly, many of these judges are violating those rules. So if you're violating your own rules of conduct, I would suggest that's a prima facie case of not serving during good behavior. Therefore, you're in violation of the fundamental employment condition for being a federal judge, and you should be simply fired, not impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, which should require a higher level of proof, but just fired from the job. If you were working at a company and you embezzled money and were prosecuted and convicted, that would be like impeachment. And then they'd have to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You'd be entitled to a jury and defense counsel and all that stuff. But if you just suck at your job, they don't have to do all that. They don't have to get you prosecuted. They can just say, we think you suck at your job. You're fired. I think we should just be firing these judges for failing to serve during good behavior. And that should be the same standard that's required to get them in the job in the first place, which is simply a majority vote. So I think we should be able to remove these judges by a majority vote. Now, that's in the Constitution. Everything I'm telling you is legally sound, but we've never done that. So obviously, if you tried to do it, they would sue. You'd be in federal court. It would take years to argue about. I think we need to do something like that because right now these federal judges they've effectively become a super branch of the federal government. They have power and control, they claim, over everybody and everything. And that is not at all what the founders intended. They're Article 3 because they're supposed to be the least powerful branch of government. They're not elected because they're supposed to be the apolitical branch of government, the one that's not politically driven. That's why the founders weren't that concerned about them being elected. If you reach the Federalist Papers, they're like, what about these judges? Why are they just appointed? Why are they not answerable? Why do we not have like terms of years for their service like we do for congressmen and presidents? And the other side said, don't worry about it. They hardly have any power at all. And now these judges are claiming basically infinite power and jurisdiction over all the things. If that's not checked, we don't have a democracy. We have a judicial tyranny over America.
Yeah. It's sad. It's pitiful. And anything that Trump tries to do, I'll say this, Biden, Obama, Clinton, even Bush, they did such a masterful job of putting these liberal judges in place. I believe they knew what they were doing when they did it to impede any level of real liberty or anything happening in the future. They really put some stopgaps in there, and it's disappointing. It's really disappointing.
So I only have a couple more minutes, but I do want to share something with your audience about these judges.
Yeah.
There's like 30 or 40 judges, federal judges with lifetime appointments, and you look at their names and it sounds like you're at the Star Wars cantina. Okay, these are not American names. Many of these people are first-generation Americans, meaning their parents were immigrants to America. Often their parents were illegal immigrants to America. And now that first generation, which was raised in an illegal migrant home, culturally of that foreign culture, are now federal judges. There are federal judges. We have, to give you an example, in the District of Columbia Federal Circuit, there's 15 trial-level federal judges. 5 of those 15 were not born in America. They were born elsewhere and became naturalized citizens after they got here. Some of them only became naturalized citizens 5 years as adults, 5 years before they were raised to the federal bench. These are not cultural Americans. One of them was born in Canada, which doesn't sound so bad, except he was born in Canada to Egyptian migrant parents. He's not even culturally Canadian. He's culturally Egyptian. Then he moved to America and becomes a naturalized citizen 5 years ago in December after Trump was elected, but before he was sworn in. This guy gets confirmed by the Senate. He's a Biden appointee. And the first thing he does is start writing injunctions against Trump. He's not anything close to culturally American. We have some of these judges who they're born in Uruguay, they're born in Trinidad, and they maintain dual citizenship with those nations. They're not even fully committed to being a United States citizen, yet they have lifetime appointments. And many of these people are the ones most egregiously ruling against Trump and most frequently getting reversed when Trump appeals these insane rulings. So their rulings were always lawless. From the beginning, they were lawless orders to our democratically elected Article 2 executive branch president. And yet our nation, real Americans, are being forced to suffer under the heel of these foreign-born, black-robed, unelected, tyrannical federal district court judges. I don't know why there are not pitchforks and torches in the street. The protests that these pro-migrant paramilitary forces are doing in Minneapolis should be nothing compared to what the American people are doing in Washington, D.C. Sadly, it's always going to be the case that ultimately victory will go to the people who are determined to win over the people who just want to be left alone. The people who just want to be left alone, they get conquered.
They'll never be left alone. Yeah. I am under the firm agreement that I don't know when it happens, But at some point, people have to quit being complacent. They have to get involved because the left is venomous. They are hungry. They are angry. They will go out and get frostbite in 20-degree weather right now. And I'm just like, at what point do people like me and people like the people watching have enough? I don't know when it comes to that point.
And by the way, I encounter many people. Listen, I'm a gun guy. I'm a Second Amendment absolutist. But anyone who thinks that we're gonna fight our way out of this is, I don't know what they're thinking of, because maybe we could. Maybe we literally could. If it came to that, the worst case scenario, and we had to rely on our Second Amendment rights to save our nation, one inevitable cost of that in our modern society is at least 100 million Americans would die. Because we live in a just-in-time food supply society. All right, if things break down, if the infrastructure breaks down, there will be no food, and there will be no food for months. And I know some of you have I'll say survivalist. That has a derogatory connotation. I don't mean it that way. I think it's prudent to do that. But you may think I have food stored up and I'll be okay. Man, I can tell you, when other people, their kids are starving and you have food, they're coming for your food, my friend. And if you're one family out of 100 that was smart enough to do that, you're providing a lot of food to other people, ultimately, is what's going to happen. Just think what you would do if your children were starving to death and there was a house down the street that had food. What would you do to get that food? Pretty much anything, I would think, right?
Yeah.
The reverse is true, too. And they're going to know you have food because you're not obviously starving to death.
That's true. I served around the world. America is the greatest country in the world because even homeless people are obese and have iPhones. That's the way I look at it. It's so true.
I have this little video clip I like to share. It was from when we had the last government shutdown and SNAP benefits were being cut off, and a news crew finds this woman on the street. She's crying. She's hungry. She's starving. She's like 5'2" and weighs 350 pounds. And she's weeping. She's weeping with this big, fat, round face. I'm hoping to find some food. I'm like, oh, my God. It looks like you ate the people who had the food.
Yeah, you ate the shopping cart.
Right.
Andrew, how can people find you? I'm going to put a link in the channel. Let people know when you do your shows and stuff like that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So it's the Branca Show. That's me on X and on YouTube, and we're on Locals and Rumble and stuff. I mean, just look around, you'll find me. I forget all the places that we are. I generally do a daily show every morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time for everybody, and then I do a members only show immediately after that. Occasional shows when there's breaking news and stuff like that, but that's our normal schedule: 11 a.m. Eastern time, and then a second show, and they run about an hour and a half each. Okay. And then what else? Hey, if people want a free copy of the book, lawofselfdefense.com/free book. We're doing a webinar in a couple weeks on how to be hard to convict if you ever have to defend yourself. It's free, doesn't cost anything, but you do have to register. You can do that at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict. I guess that's about it. Thanks for having me on, man. It was a good time. I had fun.
I really appreciate it. How do you find the members only shows? I've thought about doing the same thing. I wasn't sure how that's received. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to say it's been remarkably productive for me. So, I mean, one of the challenges, probably your show has too, on YouTube, is YouTube doesn't like me. So
me either.
They're letting me have a channel. Although every day I wake up and I go to do my morning show and I still have a YouTube channel. I'm shocked, but they're letting me have a channel. But they really crunch down on any kind of advertiser revenue.
Same here.
I just don't get much money from that. But they do allow me to have the members, and the members are not affected by, YouTube's perceived, advertiser desires. So in that sense, it tends to be more stable than the advertiser revenue. And
I think I'm going to try that.
And over time, the members, if you're doing a good job and people like your stuff, the members tend to join. We have, our membership it's 16 cents a day. It's $5 a month to be a member, and you get double the number of shows. And then we have so we have a Minuteman level of membership. And if I think that's $20 a month. Sure. But every week we do a call-in show where you get to come on the show with me. I give you the guest link on StreamYard. We have one-on-one conversations.
I do phone calls. Yeah.
Okay. And then I've never figured out how to do phone calls. I'll have to ask you about that.
Simple. I use Google Voice. It is so simple.
How do you prevent people from just like shouting the N-word 1,000 times? I mean, is there like a delay button?
I haven't had that happen yet.
Yeah.
But there is about a 3-second delay. There is about a 3-second delay.
And then we have founding father members, which is substantially more costly. Those guys get my phone number, so they can call me anytime they want. So they have me on speed dial. And listen, I'm not a genius at this internet stuff. We just try things and see what works. But currently, that's what we're doing, and that seems to be working pretty well.
I'm a redneck from Lower Alabama. I served on submarines for 20 years in the Navy. I still can't believe I've shook hands with 5 presidents and met the Queen of England. I still can't figure it out. Still can't figure it out. Andrew, I really want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do. I watch your show all the damn time, and you're welcome anytime, without a shadow of a doubt. Andrew, thank you so much. You take care.
Take care, guys.